So we're ready for Module 4. Module 4 is huge, and it's most of what I think you thought of when you thought, okay, I'm going to take this class in how to teach students with special needs. So Module 4 is going to help us be able to develop an appropriate and meaningful engagement with students with special needs. So how do we engage with students? How do we create a culture and a learning environment so that every student, no matter where they are in any kind of learning sequence or strand or performance ability, how do we have so everybody is meaningful engaged, everybody's learning at the same time. So it's not that some people are learning and some people are just kind of in the room, or you're helping the people who have difficulty learning while the other students in the room are like, okay, we're not learning anything. How does everybody learn together at the same time? Which is really what we're thinking of when we think about inclusion. So within that, so how do we have a student-centered inclusive classroom? So how do we adapt, accommodate, modify our learning so that every student is learning, we know where they are and what they need at any time in the classroom? And then how do we assess our students? How do we know what they've learned, how they've learned? And of course, assessment, the main point of assessment is to know where do we go next? So where in our teaching, what do we do next? So we talk some in this module about adaptations and accommodations. Adaptations and accommodations are created for your students who are going to be able to meet the objective. They're going to be able to meet the objective that you have for your regular class. They just need some extra consideration, some extra things in order to help them be successful. So when I think about these, I divide them into 4 areas. So I think about size, color, pacing, and modality. So size is literally how much, the size of something that I'm asking the students to learn. So sometimes it's as simple as, of course, the obvious, where you make your font bigger or make lyrics bigger for students, because sometimes they just literally can't see what's happening on the page because it's smaller than their eyes are able to process. So size can also be how much you want someone to learn. So do you want them to learn the A section and the B section? Or maybe just have some students learn the A section while others are learning both sections. When you get ready for a concert, right? So some students may be able to learn 2 of the pieces for the concert, while other students can learn all of the pieces for the concert. Is it okay to have some students with special needs perform the things that they know and have that be their contribution? Yes, it is. So the second area is color. Color is really important for students with special needs, and particularly those who respond well visually. I use color in many ways. I use color to highlight information and to help gain interest. So I will use different colored chalk, different colored markers on the board to help students see, and actually to, if I'm doing form, right, working on laying something out, or different ideas or directions or instructions, I'll use different colors to help students kind of see where areas are broken into different parts. So I also use color in music. So I have students color code notes when they need to, and I have students color in dynamic markings, phrasing, things like that. I make use of erasable highlighters a lot. So one end is the highlighter and the other end is white. So when you're finished with the choral piece, or you're finished with the band piece, or you're finished with whatever the piece of music is, you can then just take the other end of the highlighter and erase your highlighting. So erasable highlighters can be found pretty easily on the internet. Another way I use color is through transparencies. Colored transparencies placed on top of music, because it can soften the distinction between black and white. Black and white are the 2 starkest colors. So in that, it makes it the most difficult because your rods and cones in your eyes have to really focus to see what's happening. So colored transparencies help remove some of what's required so that it softens what they're supposed to do in their eyes, and then they can see the print easily. The next thing when I talk about those 4 elements is pacing. Pacing is how fast you want a student to know something. So some students with their pacing, they can go very, very quickly. You know, we've talked about the 5 domains. So students who have fast cognition, right, often You can pace things pretty quickly for them. And then other students, you have to go a little more slowly. So some students need a slower pace if they're going to perform something for you, or they need to do things in chunks. So one chunk of material one day, another chunk of material another day, so that they're not asked to perform as much at one time. The last area is modality. When I'm teaching, I make sure that I introduce everything visually, orally, and kinesthetically before I ever ask a student to be held responsible for the information. Some students with special needs have great difficulty learning through one or more channels. So, for example, many students on the autism spectrum are highly visual. So I'm going to need to make sure that I introduce that something visually. But I also will know that, students don't come into the classroom just like they don't have the Sharpies with their disabilities. They don't have Sharpies with, how they learn best, what channel works best for them. So I make sure that I introduce it all three ways. And then I also make sure when I'm assessing that I assess three ways. So the students are able to let me know what they know. In particular for students with disabilities who don't always have 2 or 3 ways to learn or 2 or 3 ways to show me. Adaptations and accommodations, right? Students who are going to be able to meet the objective. Some students, no matter how much we give them in terms of size, color, pacing, and modality, they're not going to be able to meet the stated objective for the class. For those students, I employ modifications. Modifications involve meeting the student where they are, where their functioning level is now, and teaching them there. So if I'm working in a class and the class is working on 4/16 notes, but I have a student who's still working on the difference between a quarter note and 2/8 notes, so I'm going to make sure that when I'm working on 16th notes that I'm also throwing in some quarter and eighth notes for that student, and then when I get ready to assess, I'm going to assess that student on the quarter and 2/8 notes rather than the 4/16 notes. When creating modifications for classes, I engage in what I call winding, so I wind it back. So I find the objective for the class, and then I do each little tiny step in between the objective and where that child is, and I wind it all the way back until I find that student. And sometimes I find I have to wind it all the way back to, is there a noticeable difference in the child when music is absent or present? Right? We've got some students like that. And that's where I'm going to assess a student and then slowly work the student up to where other students are. I can also then start at that objective for the class and wind forward for a student who already knows the information that's going on in class. They got 16 notes. So I go as far as I can up as much as I possibly know, and then that's where I assess that student, where they are. Because I think in classes and in schools every day, if every student is, well, first supported, I'm here for you, and then second, challenged, and you're going to learn stuff, I think it would solve a lot of the problems that we have in schools. So I hope you enjoy Module 4. It's one of my favorites. Have a great time with it. Bye.